Hello, thank you for tuning in to this 2022 primary election candidate forum for Legislative District Position 1, 22, Position 1. This forum is presented by the League of Women Voters of Thurston County in collaboration with Thurston Community Media. The League of Women Voters is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public to defend our democracy and empower voters. I am Susan Fixdahl from the League, and I will be moderating this forum. The candidates are Loretta Byrnes, Beth Doglio, Anthony Keene, Sarah León, and Maria Siguenza. Beth Doglio will be joining us through Zoom. Sans Gilmore declined our invitation just days ago. Sarah León is ill and won't be attending. For this forum, each candidate will have the opportunity to answer a series of questions in alphabetical order, and the questions will be alternated so that each has the chance to start first. You will also have the time for a 1-minute closing statement. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. The timer will show you a sign when you have 30 seconds left, and then will show a stop sign when your time is up. If you don't notice the sign, I will tell you when your time is up. For the first question, I will begin with Loretta Byrnes, followed by Beth Doglio, Anthony Keene, and Maria Siguenza. Please let me know if you need to repeat the question. What makes you the most qualified candidate for this position?
Oh, that's a great question. First of all, and thank you everybody for signing in and watching this. So I'm an economist by background, natural resource economist, and I spent the first part of my career doing international development, working in some of the poorest countries in the world. And as a part of that process, I managed programs that were funded by a variety of governments, including the US government. And when you're trying to solve poverty, you have to do a great deal of in-depth research in terms of why people do what they do or don't do what they do when you want to make things better. So we look at government policies and also private sector mechanisms, market mechanisms, and then we design the program. And I've seen in our state that we tend to just design or develop a program, spend a lot of money on it with not sufficient analysis as to the causes of the problem. And so I feel like with my experience, and I've also worked for state government, I've worked for employment security, and I've seen how our government programs do not have very good clear measures of performance, and they're not well monitored. So that's why.
Thank you. Anthony Keene?
Yeah, I believe that in LD22, we strongly value education. We are losing the educational voice with Lori Dolan's retirement. I am a 15-year educator. I'm the only person on this ticket that is an educator. And based on that, we need to maintain that educator voice. I also have a variety of leadership, including that in education. And I bring values of wanting to fight for workers, for teachers, and for everyday people.
Thank you. Beth Doglio?
Hi, I'm Beth Doglio, and I really appreciate the League putting this forum on today and your commitment to democracy. I've spent the last 30 years working to make our world a more just, equitable, and sustainable place, and so much so in the community. I've experienced working in both the private, public, and the governmental sector, and I most recently served at Climate Solutions, working on the challenging issue of climate change as the campaign director for the last 13 years. Most importantly, I served 4 years in the legislature representing the 22nd Legislative District, where I was able to drive solutions to workers' rights, reproductive access to reproductive health care, solutions to our housing crisis, standing up for LGBTQ community. I'm going to bring that experience back to the legislature and continue to drive solutions to the most pressing issues in our community.
Thank you. Maria Siguenza?
Thank you, Susan, for the question and for providing the space and us being able to provide dialogue. I think that I am the most qualified candidate because I've understand struggle. I am a proud daughter of a single parent, and during our hardest times we had to lean on social supports. So I know what that is like. I was also undocumented for the majority of my childhood. And so it's these experiences and others that really inform that perspective. And it's this struggle that I see in our community as well. I also have been serving as a public service leader for the last 9 years. And I understand that in order for us to make meaningful change, we need to collaborate with everyone, and we need to amplify the voices of those most affected. That experience and understanding how to work with communities furthest from opportunity is really key to ensuring that we create legislation that is impactful, that is lasting.
Thank you. For the second question, I will begin with Beth Doglio, followed by Anthony Keene, Maria Siguenza, and Loretta Byrnes. What do you think is the most important issue in your district that the state should address?
Well, thank you for the question. I would say what I'm hearing at the doors in the community is a variety of issues. There's a lot of concerns out there right now. But the thing that really comes through the most is people's concern about our housing crisis. People are very concerned, including myself, about the number of people who are on the streets and who don't have the services needed to get their lives back on track. I've been a very strong advocate and honored to have been endorsed by the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance and have worked with them over the past couple of years to drive funding issues at the local level. I passed a bill 1590, which provided for a councilmanic vote at the local level to slightly increase funding for housing to meet the needs of our most vulnerable neighbors, those who make 60% average median income or below. I will continue to do that as a legislator and look forward to working on those solutions with my community.
I actually agree with Beth Doglio that the housing crisis is the most pressing issue in our district. I do feel slightly differently in that it's broader than just the homelessness problem. There's a serious shortage of property available for people to buy and rent, and that is driving up prices and driving more people out of their homes. In our current economic situation, it's just going to get worse. The price of food is going up, the price of rent is going up, the price of gas is going up. Incomes are not going up the same way. So we've got a huge problem, and I think the housing is a big indicator of that problem, but it's not necessarily even the root of the problem.
Thank you. Maria Siguenza?
Thanks, Susan. You know, I have been doorbelling as well, and I'm hearing a lot of different issues. We've talked about homelessness, and I think that is definitely a pressing issue, and I'll talk about our schools. You know, we are still in the midst of a pandemic that has affected our students. They are behind. We know that there are increased feelings of suicide. We know that our classrooms are overflowing, and they're still overflowing, and we need to ensure that we are resourcing our schools. It's time, again, for our teachers to be able to teach and our students to learn. And, you know, one of the things that we've always said is that it takes a village, and I think it's time for us to remember that. It takes a village for us to ensure that our kids are learning, and we need to resource our schools adequately.
Thank you. Loretta Byrnes?
Yeah, so when I go doorbelling, I've done about 5,000 doors now. My primary issue is education. I'm really concerned that we're spending $18,000 a year now, and yet less than half the kids can read, write, and do math at grade level. So we keep spending more money, but the situation is not getting better, and it's not just due to COVID. So I end up talking to a lot of parents and a lot of teachers who are very frustrated, a lot of teachers who are no longer allowed to maintain any kind of discipline within the classroom. I talked to a father whose fourth grader is afraid to go to school because things are so volatile. And also so many children, parents are really concerned that their children are being moved on to the next grade even though they're not ready. And there's many other issues that parents are bringing up and teachers that are very frustrated. And those are due to policies that we passed in the legislature. We are making it more difficult for teachers to teach. And many teachers also say it's not just about money.
Thank you. For the third question, I will begin with Anthony Keene, followed by Maria Siguenza, Loretta Byrnes, and Beth Doglio. Should the state require local jurisdictions to address climate change in their Growth Management Act comprehensive plan updates?
I don't know, and that's the honest answer. I do think that we should be tracking that data at the local level, but what those requirements would look like would vary wildly from area to area. So I don't really know the best answer to this question.
Just to follow up, the question is, should the state require them to address climate change?
Well, it doesn't say that they're required to address climate change when I read it. It was more that should the state require them to say how they're addressing it in that report. There's a subtlety there. Like there's a reporting mechanism. Should that be required or not? I don't know that it matters one way or the other. I care about climate change, but I also don't want to create bureaucracy if it's not going to turn into something. So if they're just going to report that we're not doing anything or we're still doing the same thing we've been doing and now we're spending money writing these reports, I'd rather not spend that money that way.
Thank you. Maria Siguenza.
I think so. You know, the issue of climate change is not just an issue in Olympia, it's not just an issue in Seattle, it's not an issue in Pasco, it's an issue globally. And in order for us, you know, the same concept applies when we're talking about People First policy to climate change. It's about ensuring that we are moving together, and sometimes when we know that some local jurisdictions are not being successful, we as a state legislature need to ensure that we are moving together and empowering these cities to do the right thing.
Thank you. Loretta Byrnes.
No, I don't think they should, for similar reasons what Anthony said. I was the chair of the Kitsap County Surface and Stormwater Advisory Board, and became very involved in how the county was managing and trying to respond to growth management regulations and shoreline regulations. And it's very much often beyond their capacity. They don't have the best science and to work with. And sometimes our land is so diverse here, where you have gullies and hills, and we're already trying to apply very restrictive policies in the exact same way throughout the state, and it's not working very well. And like I said, I think this would just be additional bureaucracy beyond what they can handle, and it's usually a non-funded mandate.
Thank you. Beth Doglio?
Well, absolutely. No question about it. We are experiencing wildfires, floods, droughts across this country and right here in Washington State. And we use every single tool available to us to stem the tide of climate change and what's ahead for our future generations. We've put the policy framework in place at the state level. We have passed 100% clean electricity, moving us to clean electricity by 2045. We passed the Climate Commitment Act that puts in place a cap and trade system, and we passed the Clean Fuel Standard. But what we really need now is to have local governments, give them the tools and have them be part of the solution, because that's where the rubber really hits the road, is in our local communities. And through our growth management process, local governments can do a whole lot to move us off of fossil fuels and towards a future and a world that is sustainable for future generations. So absolutely.
Thank you. The fourth question goes first to Maria Siguenza, then Loretta Byrnes, Beth Doglio, and Anthony Keene. How important is it to you to maintain a rainy day fund in the state budget, and why?
very important. You know, we'll take the case of the pandemic, for example. I was in the current position that I'm in as the director for the Commission on Hispanic Affairs, which is a small agency under the purview of the governor. And when this pandemic hit, we were not sure what costs were going to be, right? We first understood that we were going to be in lockdown for a couple of weeks, and we thought, okay, there's some funding in the reserves to ensure that we are, you know, filling in gaps that might happen as a result of these 2 weeks. And 2 weeks turned into, well, about 2 years. And we know that those reserve funds really ensured that we could still provide support services to the most vulnerable Washingtonians. And because of that experience, it makes it even more important to ensure that we are keeping a rainy day fund for future problems.
Thank you. Loretta Byrnes?
Yeah, I agree. We do need to protect the rainy day fund. The last few years, we've been growing government massively. We are likely to have a recession during the next year or so, and we're going to need those funds as tax revenue goes down. And the other issue, though, right now is we have an abundance of revenue. And our legislature right now and our governor has a tendency that whenever there's abundance of revenue to just find more ways to spend it, which is going to be unsustainable. And they should have actually given us a tax rebate after increasing our taxes so much. But they keep increasing the taxes, and they have an abundance of revenue, and they're not accountable for how they spend that money. So yes, we should definitely have a rainy day fund.
Thank you. Beth Doglio?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of maintaining a rainy day fund. Certainly, as Maria mentioned, during the pandemic, it was very, very nice to have those funds in place so that we could help our most vulnerable neighbors. We had no idea what was ahead of us. We don't have any idea what's ahead of us. No one has a crystal ball. And so I think it's important, just like a family budget, if you can have a rainy day fund, it's a really important thing to have when that bill comes that you're not anticipating. That's, you know, same in state government. We absolutely need to have some funds put aside if there is a future recession. Again, it came in handy during the recession in the earlier 2000s, but we need to continue that practice and make sure that we keep that rainy day fund in place for sure. So thanks again for the question.
Thank you. Anthony King?
Yeah, I essentially agree with what's been said by the other candidates. It's just good fiscal management to maintain savings, whether it's in your personal account or at the government level, to be able to deal with the crises that come, much like the pandemic we're still in, really. So.
Thank you. The fifth question goes first to Loretta Byrnes, then Beth Doglio, Anthony Keene, and Maria Siguenza. What is your opinion on how the governor used his emergency powers during the pandemic?
I wish I don't know the details of the legislation that managed it, but the fact that he is still using them 2 years after, I think is ridiculous. And I think he's abused them. And I think that the legislature should have had more oversight so that it has to go to the legislature at least every 3 months to reapprove any emergency powers he may have. I think it's unfair, the mask mandate for all state employees. I talked to a woman the other day who worked in the governor's office and had a medical excuse for not getting the vaccine, but ultimately was let go anyways. And I've talked to a number of state employees that were let go due to the vaccine mandate that we don't have for the rest of the population. So no, I'm not happy with how he used his emergency powers.
Thank you. Beth Doglio?
Well, wow. I'm really glad that we had a governor who was willing to make really hard decisions. Governors across the country had to make hard decisions. They had to rely on the best data available to them and the people who were supporting them from the public health departments, trying to figure out how best to manage a pandemic. It was something that no one in our generation or the several generations before us have had encountered. And so there was a lot of guesswork that had to go on about how best to manage it. And I really thank Governor Inslee for his leadership. Would I have made all the same decisions as he did? Probably not. But I wasn't in that position. And I know that he was relying on people who were trying to give him the best information scientifically, how to make sure that we protected as many lives as possible. And Washington did do quite well in terms of the number of lives that we were able to protect during the pandemic. So I appreciated his leadership on that issue.
Thank you. Anthony King?
I lived in Taiwan at the time the pandemic started. I was the head of school at a small international school, and we had to figure it out as best we could. We were on the ground, there was no news. Taiwan's right next to China. The Taiwan government did the best they could with the little information they had. We had to make decisions about, are we gonna bring kids to school or not? You know, which is safer? Is it safer to have them at school? Is it safer to have them on the playground intermingling with other kids from other schools? These are difficult decisions and difficult choices. I think the governor did the best that he could. I think if you compare his response to governors around the country, he's not going to be remembered as the best, and he's definitely not going to be remembered as the worst. So I'm sort of neutral on what he did, because I know how hard those decisions are to make.
Thank you. Maria Siguenza.
You know, Susan, I would not have wanted to be in his shoes. Absolutely not. He did the best that he could with the data that we had. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Governor Inslee and being part of his team is that I know that our team leads with equity in mind. And the numbers were telling us that people of color and people of low income were disproportionately affected by COVID. Deaths were disproportionate, rates of infection were disproportionate, they were higher in those communities. And so if we want to ensure that we are working by and for our Washingtonians, we have to ensure that we take an equity lens, and we have to ensure that we are putting working people first. And that is what Governor Inslee did. Was it, you know, it was definitely not a popular choice, and I understand that people like me in privilege did not need all of those mandates, but thank you.
Thank you, Maria. For the sixth and final question, we'll go first to Beth Doglio. The question is, in light of current events, do you believe that there are any threats to our system of democracy? And if so, what are those threats?
Well, January 6th was a big wake-up call. Clearly, there are people at work in this country to destroy our democracy, and we need to do everything possible to safeguard against that. I really appreciate what's going on at the federal level right now, really taking an incredibly deep dive into what happened on January 6th and what could happen in the future. That's why the League of Women Voters and other organizations that are working to protect our democracy are so important. I am very, very concerned about what is to come, and hope that I can be in the legislature making sure that we're doing everything possible to make sure that the policies are in place to protect our voting system, and to protect our right to a successful transition when there is a presidential election.
Thank you. Anthony King?
This is a tough question, but I actually think that the greatest threat to our democracy is the disconnect between current politicians and actual people. We have more and more people that are being taken advantage of by the capitalism in our society. It's almost a board game. Hey, this company, are we exploiting workers? Are we exploiting customers, or do we get to exploit both? We need to change the way that we're reining in capitalism, as in we're not reining in capitalism, and actually take some action to get things to go through our legislature, and even our judicial system that are in line with the desires of the people of this country. I mean, we just saw Roe versus Wade overturned. More than 70% of the country did not want that to happen. What does that say? That's a huge disconnect. There's policy after policy that's disconnected that way. The legislatures are not doing what the people want. We need to change that.
Thank you, Anthony. Maria Siguenza?
I do think that there are threats to our democracy, and I think the biggest threat is hyperpolarization. We do have a lot of issues that we are not agreeing on as a system. I think about issues like gun control. I think about issues like holistic approaches to homelessness. I think about issues about funding our schools. And our community makes me hopeful, because as I have been knocking on doors and interacting with people, people are willing to have tough conversations. And I think at the root, in order for us to move forward as a state, as a district, we need to see each other for our humanity. And I have been able to have these really deep and tough conversations with our constituency, and I have learned that we want the same thing. We want to have prosperity, and we want to move out of struggle. And if we focus on that, I think that we can move forward together.
Thank you. Loretta Byrnes?
Yeah, I think the greatest threat to our democracy is the poor quality of our education. We're not teaching sufficient history or how the political process works. Elections happen at the county level, and each county can actually do it a little bit different, and people need to understand that. And the problem with one of the problems with our educational system is that our culture is now encouraging youth to basically make decisions and get on platforms out of emotions, not analysis, not information. And we need to instill more rigorous thinking within our educational system. We need to have high quality science education, and especially history and I'm forgetting that word, what you even call this process, that the League of Women Voters was always advocating for. Civics.
Education.
Civics, yeah. And there is a requirement for civics, but I'm not sure how great the curriculum is. So, yeah, I think that's the greatest threat.
Thank you. You now have 1 minute for a closing statement, beginning with Loretta Byrnes, followed by Beth Doglio, Anthony Keene, and Maria Siguenza.
Okay, so hello, my name is Loretta Byrnes, and I'm running for state representative. I'm an economist by background, spent 20 years overseas doing economic development in some of the poorest countries of the world. I also worked for employment security. I have a blended family of 8 adult children and 7 grandchildren, and I'm very familiar with our educational process. I attended school board meetings, 90% of them for 3 years, because I really wanted to understand why things are not working and why we're not challenging our children in the educational system. And that's why I'm running. I'm also worried about crime and how we've passed policies that are leading to increase in crime rate in our state. And I'm also really concerned about the policies that are driving up the cost of fuel, driving up the cost of home heating, trying to get rid of natural gas, even though it's an important part of our electricity grid. And that's why I'm running for state representative, and I hope you will vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Doglio?
Well, thank you to the League for your deep commitment to democracy and hosting today's forum. My roots in this district run deep, from a committed PTA president to leading the charge on funding measures for parks and sidewalks, and most recently for housing, to raising my 2 sons here in Olympia, one of whom just graduated from Olympia High School, to volunteering for a wide array of organizations. For over 30 years, I've been a community organizer and I served 4 years in the legislature. I have a policy and advocacy experience to hit the ground running, to drive solutions to our most pressing issues. That's why I've earned the endorsement of 15 labor unions, as well as endorsements from organizations advocating for affordable housing, gun responsibility, access to reproductive health care, including abortion, LGBTQ+ rights, and equitable solutions to climate change and environmental protection. I encourage you to visit my website at bethdoglio.com to learn more. I would be absolutely honored to earn your vote, to return to the legislature and continue continue delivering results for our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anthony Keene.
I'm Anthony Keene. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. I truly appreciate their commitment to our democracy. I'm an educator. I was an educator for 15 years, and I'm an engineer of 5 years, which means I care about people, I care about kids, and I want to solve problems. As a leader in education, I fought for teachers. I fought for teachers to get more money. I fought for teachers to have a better work-life balance. I fought for teachers already. Now I'm bringing that fight to the union movement because it's the most hopeful movement in our country today. I'm standing with Starbucks workers. I'm standing with teachers. I'm standing with everyday people, hence being out there with the women yesterday who were standing up against the actions of the Roe v. Wade being overturned. Please come support my campaign. You can learn more at anthonykeene.com, and I hope to earn your vote.
Thank you. Maria Siguenza.
My name is Maria Siguenza, candidate for the House of Representatives, Position 1 in Legislative District 22. I am the proud daughter of a single mother, and I was undocumented for the majority of my childhood, and I am no stranger to struggle, which I see reflected in our community. I think that we need to ensure that we are funding our schools so that teachers can teach and students can learn. We need to provide tools that small businesses need in order to thrive and survive because they contribute to the diversity of our community. And we need to take a holistic approach to homelessness because it's not just about getting people into homes, it's about keeping those keys in hands. I've been a public service leader for the last 9 years, and I create change through collaboration and amplifying the voices of our community because it's that when we move together that we create lasting change. Together, we can move our community from struggle to prosperity. I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta Byrnes, Beth Doglio, Anthony Keene, and Maria Siguenza for participating in this forum. We thank TC Media for producing it. Ballots will be mailed July 13th and must be mailed or placed in a ballot box by 8 p.m. on August 2nd. You can register to vote online through July 25th at votewa.gov and in person until 8 p.m. at the Thurston County Auditor's Office on August 2nd to vote in the primary. We encourage our viewers to be a voter in the primary election.